Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Group 3, and we will be discussing the feminist theory. Feminist theory is the extension of feminism into theoretical, fictional, or philosophical discourse, and it aims to understand the nature of gender equality. It also examines the following: men and women's social roles, their experiences, interests, and chores. Also, feminist politics in a variety of fields such as anthropology, sociology, communication, media studies, psychoanalysis, political theory, literature, and philosophy. It often focuses on analyzing gender inequality, and it includes discrimination, sexual objectification, oppression, and patriarchy. Feminist theory explore both inequality in gender relations and the constitution of gender. It often focuses on analyzing gender inequality. In this theory, it defines that men was associated with the mind while women was being seen as property among them. Feminism is the advocacy of women's right on the basis of equality of the sexes. Now let's move on to the history of feminist theory. On 1794, the first feminist theory emerged in different publications such as The Changing Women, a Navajo myth which gives credit to a woman who populated the world in the end. On 1851, Sojourner Truth addressed women's rights issues through Ain't I Women, and in 1872, Susan B. Anthony questioned the Constitution for its male-gendered language and why women should have to abide by laws that do not specify women. On the year 1920, Nancy Cott makes a distinction between modern feminism and its antecedents, particularly the struggle for suffrage. In United States, she places the turning point in the decades before and after women obtained the vote. On 1949, Simone de Beauvoir stood in opposition to an image of the woman in the home. He provided an existentialist dimension to feminism through the publication The Second Sex. And on 1960, the resurgence of feminist activism was accompanied by an emerging literature of concerns for the earth, spirituality, and environmentalism. Feminist psychologists such as Jean Baker Miller sought to bring a feminist analysis to previous psychological theories, proving that there was nothing wrong with women, but rather with the way modern culture viewed them. And now let's move on to the different disciplines of the feminist theory. First is the bodies. In Western thought, the body has been historically associated solely with women, whereas men have been associated with the mind. As Susan Bordo, a feminist philosopher, examines the early philosophies of Aristotle, Hegel, and Descartes, she revealed how distinguishing binaries such as the spirit and matter, male activity, and female passivity have worked to solidify gender characteristics and categorization. While men have historically been associated with the intellect and the mind or spirit, women have long been associated with the body, the subordinated, negatively imbued term in the mind or body dichotomy. The women's health movement and lesbian feminism are also associated with this bodies debate. The standard and contemporary sex and gender system. The standard sex determination and gender model consist of evidence based on the determined sex and gender of every individual serve as norms for societal life. Sex determination gives importance to genitals and how they are formed via chromosomes and DNA binding proteins. Standard model defines gender as a social understanding or ideology that defines what behaviors, actions, and appearances are normal for males and females. Socially biasing children's sex and gender system. It broadens the horizons of the sex and gender ideologies. It revises the ideology of sex to be a social construct that is not limited to either male or female. Sex is not a social construct but a social one. Instead, since society and doctors decide on what it means to be male, female, or intersex in terms of sex chromosomes and genitals, in addition to their personal judgment on who or how one passes as a specific sex. The ideology of gender remains in a social construct, but is not as strict and fixed. Instead, it is malleable and forever changing. Epistemologies. It seeks to establish knowledge production from a woman's perspective. It theorizes that from personal experience comes knowledge which helps each individual look at things from a different insight. It is central to feminism that women are systematically subordinated, and bad faith exists when women surrender their agency to this subordination. Simone de Beauvoir labels such women as mutilated and immanent. Intersectionality. Examination of various ways in which people are oppressed based on the relational web of dominating factors of race, sex, class, nation, and sexual orientation. It describes the simultaneous, multiple, overlapping, and contradictory systems of power that shape our lives and political options. This debate raises the issue of understanding the oppressive lives of women that are only shaped by gender alone, but by other elements such as racism, classism, ageism, heterosexism, ableism, and others.
Language. Language may not serve the literary understanding of human lives. Women writers have addressed the issues of masculinized writing through male gender language that may not serve to accommodate the literary understanding of human lives. In other words, they attempt to reclaim and redefine woman through a deeper thinking of language. They discuss the problem of masculine language that might not be suitable to allow for the literary understanding of human life. So tinangka nilang mabawi at muling bigyang kahulugan ang mga kababaihan sa pamamagitan ng mas malalim na pag-iisip ng wika. Psychology. Feminist psychology is a form of psychology centered on societal structures and gender. Critics the fact that historically psychological is oriented on the values and principles of feminism. It incorporates gender and the ways women are affected by issues resulting from it. Ethel Dench Pfeffer. She was one of the first women to enter the field of psychology. She was the executive secretary of the National College Equal Suffrage League, 1914. She was also an American psychologist and feminist organizer. Feminist psychology is based on the values and principles of feminism. It takes into account gender and the ways in which problems caused by it affects women. The theory was developed to demonstrate that there was nothing wrong with women, but rather with the way modern society was being practiced. Ito ay para mapabuti or ma-improve ang buhay ng mga kababaihan or lahat ng tao through research, clinical practice, and social advocacy na tumutuon sa mga women and girls. So, ang feminism ay nagbibigay ng high value sa mga kababaihan considering ang mga karapat-dapat na pag-aralan in their own right and not just in comparison with men. One major psychological theory, relational cultural theory. Jean Baker Miller, whose book Toward a New Psychology of Women proposes that growth-fostering relationships are a central human necessity and that disconnection are source of psychological problems. Inspired by Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystic and other feminist classics from the 1960s, relational cultural theory proposes that isolation is one of the most damaging human experience and is best treated by reconnecting with other people, and that a therapist should foster an atmosphere of empathy and acceptance for the patient, even at the cost of the therapist's neutrality. Ang feminine mystic ay yung assumption na ang mga kababaihan ay mapupulfilled mula sa kanilang gawaing bahay, kasal, sexual lives, and children. Ang mga paniniwala dito ay ang woman who truly feminine should not want to work, get an education, or have political opinions. The book showed them a systemic analysis kung paano pinapain ng lipunan ang mga kababaihan upang manatili sila sa bahay bilang may bahay or housewife. So this theory ay nakabatay sa clinical observation at hinahangad na patunayan na walang mali sa kababaihan kundi sa paraan ng pagtingin sa kanila ng modern culture. Psychoanalysis. Psychoanalytic feminism and feminist psychoanalysis are based on Freud and his psychoanalytic theories, but they also supply an important critique of it. It maintains that gender is not biological, but is based on the psychosexual development of the individual, but also that sexual difference and gender are different notions. From the last 30 years of 20th century, the contemporary French psychoanalytical theories concerning the feminine that refer to sexual difference rather than to gender. In other words, they contended that men and women perceive themselves differently as a result of early experience, with men seeing themselves as more masculine and women are more feminine. Ang mga kalalakihan at kababaihan ay naiiba ang pananaw sa kanilang sarili bilang resulta ng maagang karanasan na ang mga lalaki nakikita nila ang sarili bilang mas panlalaki at ang mga kababaihan bilang mas pambabae. Ito ay nagpapanatili na ang ating gender ay hindi biological, but nakabatay ito sa psychosexual development ng individual. Kaiba ang sex at gender sa paniniwala at definition. So, this psychoanalytic feminism is a theory of oppression kung saan ang mga lalaki ay inherent psychological na pangangailangan upang sakupin ang mga kababaihan. Literary theory. Feminist criticism informed by feminist theories or politics. Its history has been varied from classic works of female authors such as George Eliot, Virginia Woolf, and Margaret Fuller to recent theoretical work in women's studies and gender studies by third-grade authors. 1970s was concerned with the politics of women's authorship and the representation of women's condition within literature. It aims that reinterpret the old text at itatag ang kahalagahan ng pagsulat ng kababaihan upang mailigtas ito mula sa pagkawala o pagbaliwala sa mundong pinangungunahan ng mga lalaki. Feminist literary criticism has taken many new turns with the introduction of more nuanced ideas of gender and subjectivity as part of the breakdown of pre-existing power relations and has studied gender in terms of psychoanalysis. Film theory. Laura Mulvey have pointed to the male gaze that predominates in classical Hollywood filmmaking through the use of various film techniques such as shot reverse shot. The viewers are led to align themselves with the point of view of a male protagonist. Feminist film theory of the last 20 years is heavily influenced by the general transformation in the field of aesthetics, including the new options of articulating the gaze offered by psychoanalytical French feminism like Bracha Etenier's feminine, maternal, and matricial gaze. Ang film theory ay kumakatawan at nagpaparami ng mga alamat tungkol sa kababaihan at pagkababae. So, according kay Laura Mulvey, nasa loob ng film, ang mga lalaki ang aktibong manonood at ang mga babae ay naging passive na paksa na kumakatawan sa gusto ng mga lalaki. She justified this theory through a various example na nagpapaliwanag na sa classic Hollywood cinema, ang babae ay nakakambala sa mga daloy ng pagsasalaysay ng pelikula. The male gaze is using women's sexuality and stereotypes of women by showing their femininity. The theory suggests that male gaze denies women and they are used as the male subject and visual pleasure. Ang male gaze ay gumagamit ng sexualidad ng babae sa pamamagitan ng pagpapakita ng mga babae sa kanilang pagkababae. Ginagamit sila bilang subject ng lalaki at kasiyahan sa kanilang paningin. Art history. Linda Nochlin and Griselda Pollock are prominent art historian writing on contemporary and modern artists and articulating art history from a feminist perspective since the 1970s. Pollock works with French psychoanalysis and in particular with Kristevas and Integers theories to offer new insight into art history and contemporary art, with special regard to questions of trauma and the transgeneration memory in the works of women artists. So Nochlin distracted art history by pointing out and challenging methodological assumptions. Sinira ni Nochlin ang art history sa pamamagitan ng pagtukoy at paghamon ng mga methodological assumptions. She promoted art historians who examine the work in front of them while focusing on its subject matter, inspired by a sensitivity to its feminist spirit. Because of her interest at participation, si Pollock ay na-inspired upang baguhin kung paano tiningnan ang mga kababaihan sa mundo ng art history. Nagbigay ng feminist campaign ng kakayahang baguhin kung paano ipinapakita ang mga kababaihan sa art na ngayon ay laganap na sa lipunan.
Feminist history refers to the rereading and reinterpretation of history from a feminist perspective. It is not the same as the history of feminism, which outlines the origins and evolution of the feminism movement. It also differs from women's history, which focuses on the role of women in historical events. The goal of feminist history is to explore and illuminate the female viewpoint of history through rediscovery of female writers, artists, philosophers, etc., in order to recover and demonstrate the significance of women's voices and choices in the past. History comprises the narrative, chronological, or thematic of the movement and ideologies which have aimed at equal rights for women. Feminist movement, also known as the women's movement or feminism, refers to a series of social movement and political campaigns for radical and liberal reforms on women issues created by the inequality between men and women. Such issues are women's liberation, reproductive rights, domestic violence, maternity leave, equal pay, women's suffrage, sexual harassment, and sexual violence. Women history is the study of the role that women have played in history and the method required to do so. Geography. Feminist geography is often considered part of the broader postmodern approach to the subject, which is not primarily concerned with the development of conceptual theory in itself but rather focuses on the real experiences of individuals and groups in their own localities upon the geographies that they live in within their own communities. In addition to its analysis of the real world, it is also critiques existing geographical and social studies, arguing that academic traditions are delineated by patriarchy and that contemporary studies which do not confront the nature of previous work reinforce the male bias of academic study. The feminist philosophy refers to a philosophy approach from a feminist perspective. Feminist philosophy involves attempts to use method of philosophy to further the cause of the feminist movement. It also tries to criticize or evaluate the ideas of traditional philosophy from within a feminist view. These critiques stem from a dichotomy Western philosophy, have conjecture with the mind and body phenomena. Feminist philosophy is philosophy that is aimed at understanding and challenging the oppression of women. Feminist philosophy examines issues that are traditionally found in practical ethics and political philosophy, metaphysics, epistemology, and philosophy of language. Feminist sexology is an offshoot of traditional studies of sexology that focuses on the intersectionality of sex and gender in relation to the sexual lives of women. Feminist sexology shares many principles with a wider field of sexology. In particular, it does not try to prescribe a certain path of normality for women's sexuality, but only observe and note the different and varied ways in which women expresses their sexuality. From feminist perspective, sexology, which is the study of human sexuality and sexual relationship, relates to the intersectionality of gender, race, and sexuality. For example, men have dominant power and control over women in their relationship, and women are expected to hide their true feelings about sexual behaviors. Women of color face even more sexual violence in the society. Based on my research, sexology is the scientific study of human sexuality, including human sexual interests, behaviors, and functions. Intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of person, social, and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. Monosexual paradigm. Monosexual paradigm is a term coined by Blasingame, a self-identified African American bisexual female. Blasingame used this term to address the lesbian and gay communities who turned a blind eye to the dichotomy that oppressed bisexual from both heterosexual and homosexual communities. This oppression negatively affects the gay and lesbian communities more so than the heterosexual community due to its contradictory exclusiveness of bisexual. Blasingame argued that in reality, dichotomies are inaccurate to the representation of individuals because nothing is truly black or white, straight or gay. Her main argument is that biphobia is the central message of two roots: internalized heteroism and racism. Based on my research, monosexuality is a romantic or sexual attraction to members of one sex or gender only. A monosexual person may identify as heterosexual or homosexual. Heterosexual, boy to girl, being sexually attracted solely to people of opposite sex. While homosexuality, boy to boy or girl to girl, is being romantic attraction, sexual behavior between numbers of the same sex or gender. Biphobia refers to the stigma, prejudice, and discrimination toward those who are bisexual.
Politics feminist is an area of philosophy that focuses on understanding and critiquing the way political philosophy is on articulating how advances feminist concerns. Feminism, as a political movement, worked to fight inequality, the social, cultural, economic, and political subordination of women. The goal of feminist politics is to end the domination of women through transforming institutions and theories that support women's subordination. Economics is the critical study of economies with a focus on gender-aware and inclusive economic and policy analysis. Feminist economists have long questioned gender-blind economic policies and helped design solutions to increase equality and tackle discrimination. Legal theory dedicated to changing women's status through a rework of the law and its approach to gender is the theoretical study of the propriety of law. Scholars of jurisprudence seek to explain the nature of law in its most general form and provide a deeper understanding. Communication theory, providing the potential to help individuals
understand the human condition, name personal experience, and engage this experience through storytelling, and give useful strategies for achieving justice. Public relation is the practice managing and disseminating information from an individual or an organization to the public in order to influence their perception.
Technical writers have concluded the visual language can convey facts and ideas clearer than almost any other means of communication. According to the feminist theory, gender may be a factor in how human represent reality. With that being said, the self-concept has significant effect on how men and women represent reality in different ways. Recently, technical communicators term such as visual rhetoric, visual language, and document design indicate a new awareness of importance of visual design. Based on this study, she creates a feminist theory of design and connects it to the technical communicators. Based on this conclusion, the feminist theory of design can go on to say that gender does play a role in how humans represent reality. So Deborah S. Bosley conducted a study. This study circulated on an undergraduates, male and female. The male uses more angular direction, suggesting a more aggressive behavior, while female used more of a curve. According to Deborah, studies of women and leadership indicates a preference for non-hierarchical work pattern. And thus, this conclude that this feminist theory of design can go on to say that the gender does play a role in how humans represent reality. Black feminist criminology. Black feminist criminology theory is a concept created by Hilaire Potter in the 1990s and a bridge that integrates feminist theory with criminology. For years, black women were historically overlooked and disregarded in the study of crime and criminology. However, with the new focus on black feminism that sparked in 1980s, black feminists began to contextualize their unique experiences and examine why the general status of black women in the criminal justice system was lacking in female-specific approaches. For instance, design black feminist criminology, economic deprivation, status equality between sexes, distinctive socialization pattern, racism, and sexism should all be taken into account between black men and black females. The solution to this problem is the black feminist criminology. It takes 4 factors into account. 1. It observes the social structure, oppression of black women. 2. It recognizes the black community and its culture. 3. It looked at black intimate and familial relations. And 4. It looked at the black women as an individual. These 4 factors will help distinguish black women from black males into accurate branch of learning in the criminal justice system. Criticism. It has been said that black feminist criminology is still in its infancy stage. Therefore, there is a little discussion or studies that disapprove it as an effective feminist perspective. In addition to its age, black feminist criminology has not actively accounted for the role of religion and spirituality in Black women's experience with abuse. So, Black feminist theory or Black feminist criminology is still in its infancy stage, which means it is not yet acknowledged or it is not yet fully developed because there are some Black women that are still experiencing abuse. Feminist Science and Technology Studies. Feminist Science and Technology Studies, or STS, refers to the transdisciplinary field of research on the ways gender and other markers of identity intersect with technology, science, and culture. The practice emerged from feminist critique on the masculine-coded uses of technology in the fields of natural, medical, and technical science and its entanglement in gender and identity. A large part of feminist techno-science theory explains science and technologies to be linked and should be held accountable for the social and cultural development resulting from both fields. There are some key issues feminist techno-science studies addresses